Good evening, ladies and gentlemen and friends. Welcome. I'm glad to be here with you this evening as we kind of take a dive into the paralegal role and what paralegals do. Um, the legal industry has a number of wonderful, tremendous roles, and one size does not fit all. Whether you want to be a lawyer, whether you want to be a legal secretary, whether you want to be part of a courts, there are so many unique roles and we all play a part. But one of the most important parts within a law firm and within the legal industry and this environment is indeed the paralegal. While the attorney gets all the glory, gets all the headlines, they know about all the law. Deep down, when in doubt, when all hell's breaking loose, the one that they turn to get the job done is the paralegal. The paralegal, without a doubt, we are the ones that get the work done. We do not quit until the job is completed. Paralegals are basically the lifeblood. You can call it whatever you want, whether we're the whip, the wind, we keep the sludge moving in the pipeline. That is exactly what we do. We play a very complicated role. We are part taskmaster, part firefighter, and part therapist. We're playing a lot of different roles here. That is what we do for a living. A little bit about myself before we kind of dive into the particular elements of what paralegals do, some education background, as well as, how to kind of get your foot in the door. So, as Lori said, I'm originally from Long Island. I moved out to San Francisco about 13 years ago, but I've had roots in San Francisco since I was a kid. My mother grew up here. My parents met out here. They got married out here. I originally, all my life, I was going to be a teacher, and that's what I went to school for. And an opportunity arose to start within the legal industry, and that is where I've ended up. And for the last going on now over 13 years, I've been part of this wonderful paralegal profession and being a part of that process. I started from the ground floor up. At the beginning, I did very minimal sort of tasks in which I was a file clerk, a receptionist, learning my trade. And slowly but surely, you build yourself up. Start with 5 cases. Then I had 10 cases. All of a sudden, I'm handling 25 cases and going to trial. I started at a small personal injury firm, and then I moved to Fox Rothschild about 3 years ago. It is true, and I see some of the names on the line that I do recognize that we have some people within who have attended a paralegal program or have taken some classes there. Yes, I did attend San Francisco State University paralegal program, and I graduated in 2015. Other than that, the first thing I want to address is discuss what exactly a paralegal is and kind of go through what my day by day is. And this is where I'm going to just start off right off the bat. There is no such thing as a typical day as a paralegal. And that's probably, if you like variety, if you like to be on the edge of your seat, then the paralegal life is going to be for you, because there is never a dull moment as a paralegal. One day you're handling document review, the next thing you're preparing for trial. It's a bit of a roller coaster there. And if you like the highs and the lows, the creamy middles, this is the profession for you. Let's break down some of the kind of the nitty-gritty of what paralegals do. So I said at the opening that paralegals basically we're helpers, okay? We help lawyers basically keep the trains on the tracks. We got to make sure that everything is going to arrive safely and timely. One of our biggest things that we do is we keep track and keep on our deadlines. Basically, no matter what legal field you enter, okay, whether you deal with criminal, civil litigation, trust and estates, there is this idea that there is a deadline, that something is due on a given day. And lawyers, they kind of get lost in the sauce, right? They're trying to handle a million different things. Now, look, as paralegals, we handle about 1 billion different things. But sometimes lawyers are not carefully attuned to when something is due or needed by. And that's where they turn to their handy dandy paralegal and say, hey, when is this due? And you have to remind the attorney, be like, yeah, this is due tomorrow. You need to look at this. You need to do this, X, Y, and Z. And a good paralegal, what they do is they understand the problem. They proactively react to that problem, and they create solutions related to that. Some of the day in, day out things that paralegals do cover and handle are as follows. First, we draft a variety of different documents, whether these are documents that are going to be filed within the court, whether they are going to be exchanged amongst the different parties. We handle a lot of different documents, and as part of that document process, you need to be very carefully attuned to attention to detail and to be a proofreader. Little known fact, lawyers are not always the best writers, okay? Sometimes they can't even spell simple words like improvement. But that is where paralegal comes in. We clean up the messes related to spelling and proofing, as well as formatting certain documents so that they comply with the legal rules. One of the key things that a paralegal possesses is that we are always on top of these court rules that are available. And as a paralegal, there's a couple of different court rules that we need to abide by. Basically, there's 3 sets. First, you have the rules of court that are applicable to a certain field, right? And we'll call this a code of procedure. Then there is a second set, which is known as the local rules. The local rules, this is going to be hard to believe for those in our audience here tonight, but every county in California is unique and different. They have specific rules that aren't necessarily the same in other jurisdictions. For example, there's a court in San Francisco, there's a court in Alameda, right? But those 2 counties do not have the same local rules related to when motions can be heard. And so as a paralegal, you have to research those rules and provide the accurate information to the attorney so that you can properly notice a motion before the court. Finally, on top of all this, the judges have their own rule set. So as a paralegal, you're kind of balancing out all these rules to make sure that things are going to be timely filed and served correctly. So my second point on here is that you have to be a great proofer, right? And a kind of a formatter. You don't have to be the most top-notch writer. I think one of the critical key skills and aspects of a paralegal is attention to detail and noticing if something is amiss and not being afraid to bring it up. As part of our job with any case that we handle, we are constantly reviewing, analyzing, and developing strategy with a wide variety of documents. And during this review, analysis, and strategy, we are constantly in communication with our attorney. We're always talking with the attorney about next steps, strategy, etc. A great paralegal is someone who is constantly in communication and knowing exactly what is going on with the case. And as part of that, we have to be aware of how to, one, delegate, and two, know how to control the pots and pans on the stovetop. And what I would say about this is as follows. There are sometimes we have to move things to the back burner and to the front burner based on whatever brings us to our day, right? It's always an interesting day to begin with because you may have a laundry list of things that you want to accomplish, and within 5 minutes of you coming to work, it gets thrown right out the window. So part of our job is to be flexible and adaptable to that. I briefly talked about this at the beginning. Here, we research a number of issues, procedure, and other topics. I will say that depending at the firm that you're at, legal research may fall to a junior lawyer rather than a paralegal, but there are some times that a paralegal is called in to research a topic and review cases. I will say that as part of our drafting and formatting and proofing prowess, paralegals usually will have to review the cases that are being cited within a brief that is going to be submitted before the court to make sure that the citations are correct. So we're a bit of a cite checker, if you will. We are a guru when it comes to calendar. Live by the deadline, die by the deadline is my motto. So as a paralegal, we have to make sure, we're kind of we're a train station here. Got to make sure that the trains are coming in on time and leaving the station at the correct time. So as part of our job responsibilities, we are constantly looking at the calendar, at our deadline, and planning how to meet the deadlines that are within the legal field. We're the whip, okay, when it comes to case management. That's what we are. We're going into the lawyer's office, and we're going in there and we are discussing all these different things that are going on and making sure that the attorney is going to be responsive to the deadlines as well as whatever communications that need to be addressed. The final thing on this slide here is that we are kind of a trial expert. So in litigation, there are moments where we are going to be required to go to trial, okay? And you may, as part of being part of a paralegal practice, one of the terms that is used is hot seating, in which we are going to actually sit through the trial and assist with the demonstrative, the demonstration of evidence to the jury and the judge and the witness during the trial. As part of that experience, okay, the attorney is going to turn to us to use the operable technology that is available to us and tell us to present their case through the use of documents, photographs, and video. Lawyers, most lawyers, are notoriously terrible when it comes to technology. So that's why they turn to us and say, hey, I need you to present this on the screen. And we know exactly how to do that. Now, at this point, if you haven't run out of the building yet or the experience, you might be saying to yourself, this is exactly what you've been looking for here as a paralegal. I want to just briefly say, related to this, as we talk about some of the core skill sets here, is that there are a lot of transferable skills that you possess at this given time. Okay? Before you even walk into the room. Yes, there is going to be training needed related to some of these programs that are out there. Okay? Some of the legal technology, if you will. Yes. Are you going to have to learn some of the lingo within a law firm? Absolutely. But you possess skills right now that are critical to the paralegal profession. Have you spoken to anybody? Have you dealt with customers before or had to communicate with somebody? That is probably one of the most important things, is to clearly communicate to another person what is going on and to calmly explain the situation. I'm sure everybody in here has at one time or the other had a, kind of a tense moment, a stressful moment. There are sometimes a lot of stressful moments here. This is not for the faint of heart, if you will. Being a paralegal, you have to ride this roller coaster. If you are good under pressure, this is the profession for you. There are some other skills and kind of some competencies that you develop as a paralegal. Okay? You have to be proactive. Okay? You have to not be afraid to talk to the attorney when something is going on. You have to keep them informed. Yes, attorneys, they do a tremendous job. They know all about the law. But sometimes their organization skills, not good. They couldn't even deliver a bottle of milk to the next door neighbor, even if we gave them instructions and a map. That is what the paralegal is for. Organizing, delegating, getting stuff done. That's why we're here. The next 6 things are kind of like what great paralegals possess, okay? So there is a certain level of professionalism. Do we show up in our office looking professional, or do we look like a slob? Great paralegals have this sense of a lot of pride in what we do, pride in our work, pride in our appearance. Responsibility. We take responsibility for any task that lands on our desk. And if we end up delegating that task, we are going to make sure that that task gets completed at one point or another. As paralegals, we take ownership of our work. We have to own it. The work product that we create, our communications with either the client, the lawyer, the court, opposing counsel, whoever we talk about, we're taking ownership of those tasks to make sure that they get done. We take accountability for our actions, okay? Similar to ownership. But when we talk about accountability, we take pride in our work, but if something goes amiss, we're not blaming others. We're going to fall on our sword and say, hey, this is on me. But here's the thing about accountability. Things tend to go awry, okay, when you are in a law firm, in the legal industry. Things happen. But the great paralegals, what they do, they're problem solvers. We find solutions. So things may go, a little topsy-turvy, but we have and can present competently solutions to those problems. Communication. This is key. This is probably the most critical, and I'm sure that everybody on this webinar tonight has at some point or another talked to somebody else and came up with solutions and communicate. Now, I know it's hard. Some people are stubborn. And in the legal industry, you're going to meet a lot of stubborn folks out there. But if you are an individual who can clearly communicate and provide the necessary details to figure out a solution, that's a skill. Finally, we work as a team. Okay? This is not, I believe what I would say is one band, one sound. Okay? That is what a legal team looks like. We work together to solve problems and get the job done. Now, there is a bit of a changing role here because of the use of artificial intelligence. Now, I do not want to scare the folks out there. I don't want to be, I, for one, welcome our new AI overlords here, and they're going to lock the pod doors on us and we can't get out. No, we're not there yet. AI is a helpful, useful tool, okay? It's going to be able to, it will help synthesize some information. It will help us with our legal research, but it's not going to completely replace the paralegal. Why? It still needs to be double checked. It still needs a review by an actual human being. I'll give you an example. A couple of years ago, a law firm in New York City utilized AI. Okay? They utilized AI for a brief and relied on the artificial intelligence related to their case citations in the brief. Didn't bother to check them. They were made up. Completely made up by the AI program. They were wrong on the case citation. They were wrong about what the case actually stood for, etc. So there are advances within this technology, within this industry. Okay, AI is being used. Okay, there are advances in the technology related to reviewing documents, as well as within trial presentation. Okay, back in the old days, for trial presentation, you would use butcher paper and what is known as an Elmo to amplify your documents. Well, there's now specialized software related to this presentation of evidence. So there are some advances. Here's the good news. If you are a tech person, this is going to be a very interesting legal field for you, because as paralegals, we often use, I use technology on an everyday basis. The most basic that everybody possesses, okay? I am sure everybody in here at one point or another, you opened up Microsoft Word, or you opened up Outlook, or you opened up maybe Microsoft Excel. Those are things I'm in daily. So you don't need, and I will say this, don't be intimidated by this idea, oh, there's legal technology. I can't join this profession. While there are some basics that it would be helpful to know, you will learn some of the more specialized legal technology as you progress. So I want to just give kind of an expansion here related to Well, maybe I'm not exactly 100% interested in, um, I'm not 100% interested in being a paralegal, but I'm interested in the legal industry. That's fantastic. So, um, as a current paralegal, I have a very varied practice, I would say. It's kind of interesting, but I would say if somebody asked me what practice you do, I say litigation. I work on a number of cases that deal with labor and employment, tax issues, um, probate, and other general litigation, meat and potatoes sort of stuff, getting in the surgery operating room, if you will, related to that. Maybe litigation is not your game. Maybe you don't like the adversarial field. There are a number of legal fields that you can enter and get interested in. So, first of all, you have to follow what's in your heart. Don't shut yourself out, however, and just say, oh, I'll never do family law. I'll never do this. You never know. It's very interesting. I have a very good friend who started out in trust and estates, and it's like, oh, I don't really know. I just started out in trust and estates. It was a job, right? And she started doing it, and she got into it. It's like, I like trust and estates. It's good. So don't be afraid to test out different waters here related to the fields. There are multiple fields, from litigation to bankruptcy, trust, estates and wills, corporate, criminal, family law, immigration. Two things to keep in mind here. Usually, how I classify it is as follows. There are the litigation practices, and then there's like the transactional practices. So when we think about litigation, we think about personal injury, we think about criminal, we think about labor and employment. I would also put in there, sometimes, trust and estates can get into litigation as well. Those are kind of your litigation categories. When we talk about transactional, we're thinking about bankruptcy, corporate, wills, and probate. Those are usually your transactional areas. I would also say that there's a varying level of emotion related to both categories. There's definitely a human element regarding any legal industry that you're in, but I would say, as a legal professional, I would submit to you that usually, family law, immigration law, criminal law, those are going to be more emotional. Okay? Those are going to have there might be some rough days because there's such a personal nature to them that it is absolutely human to have your emotions moved and your feelings moved. So that's something to keep in mind as you test out the waters of these different legal industries. Now, you might say to yourself, well, I don't want to be tied down in a law firm being a paralegal. There are a number of opportunities that you can go besides a law firm. Paralegals are utilized elsewhere. First of all, nonprofit organizations and in-house counsel will typically have paralegal roles. The courts. So the courts utilize a number of folks related to clerks, related to judicial assistants that assist the court in drafting and dealing with the general public. So maybe you don't want to be a paralegal. Maybe the description here this evening doesn't exactly excite you. But there are positions within the court that you can apply for that would utilize legal skills without being quote unquote tied down at a law firm. Further, within the legal industry, there are jobs within e-discovery and as court reporters. So when we talk about electronic discovery, electronic discovery is basically the review and analysis of a voluminous amount of documents that are produced in the scope during a question and answer session during litigation. Okay? This is known as discovery. And as part of the e-discovery team, there are specialized positions that assist with the searching of documents, the reviewing of documents, and the analysis of documents. So maybe you don't like the idea of drafting, okay? Drafting and proofing, but you like the idea of reviewing a document and seeing if it's responsive to a request or if it has certain information that is important in the case. There are specialists within this e-discovery house that could be the right role for you, in which one of your primary tasks would be to review documents and evaluate the document of whether or not it is responsive to a certain question. Court reporters. So, little known fact here in the state of California, there is a shortage of certified court reporters in the state. Now, for those that don't know, court reporters, they type out information during a hearing at the court or during what is known as a deposition, which is a question and answer session between attorneys and a witness about a certain event. And court reporters, they type out all the information. Now, there have been some technology there's been some technology advances within court reporting that allow for a digital recorder to transcribe the deposition. However, many lawyers still prefer having, instead of a technology device recording recording the words of the attorneys, they want somebody actually in the seat and actually typing out the words. Maybe that's something that appeals to you. Maybe you're a great typer. Maybe you enjoy transcribing things. There is a shortage of court reporters out there, and that may appeal to you. So that is not exactly, not exactly in line with being a paralegal, but another avenue within this legal industry. From a paralegal, there are a number of opportunities out there that one can go. First of all, many paralegals have started out as a paralegal and then have jumped to being a lawyer. So they've gone to a paralegal program, which we'll talk about in the next slide, in which they've gained some education. Then they may have practiced as a paralegal for a couple of years and decided they were going to take the next step and get their JD and become a lawyer. There's also management and leadership opportunity as a paralegal. So if you decide to embrace this wonderful challenge and profession as a paralegal, you can continue on and become either an office manager or even a paralegal manager, in which you are managing a group of junior paralegals. There's also the opportunity, since there are several schools, and there's in many states, including in California, that have specialized paralegal programs. Okay, and the paralegal programs often are looking for dedicated professionals to teach classes to those starting out in the industry. And, that is also another avenue from just being a paralegal to becoming a paralegal instructor. So, how do we get started on this? It is recommended, and I will submit to folks here on our webinar tonight, that you obtain your paralegal certificate. if you've been out there before, you may have seen, um, if you've looked at job postings, they usually say that they want paralegals with a paralegal certificate from an ABA program. That's the American Bar Association program. So the first step would be to obtain this certificate. Um, there are a number of schools throughout California. To name a few here in the Bay Area, we have San Francisco State, we have East Bay, and we have Skyline. Those are three ABA approved programs that have a paralegal program certificate course. Generally, these programs require that you have at least 50 semester units of college credit in order to apply for admission to their program. Typically, if you have a Bachelor of Arts already, you are automatically eligible. So it is recommended that you have some college education before you apply for the program. I know that for some programs, you could take it concurrently at the same time, but that is a program by program basis. I'm going to distinguish here, and I know this is going to be what's the difference between a certificate and certifications. So a certificate, a paralegal certificate, that is going through, I believe it's at least 8 courses within a paralegal program. Okay, I think it's 24 units, if you will. By completing 24 units, you are eligible for a paralegal certificate. And basically, the school is saying you've attended this ABA program, you completed 24 units, and you are officially a graduate of this paralegal program. Certifications are basically offered by national paralegal groups, and they are, to obtain your certification, you have to pass an examination and keep up with what are known as continuing education credits, or MCLE. That's M as in Mary, C as in cat, L as in Larry, E as in Everett, MCLE, in which they require you to pass an arduous examination and continue your education journey by taking these MCLE credits. And then you have this designation of letters next to your name stating that you're either a certified paralegal, an advanced certified paralegal, a registered paralegal, etc. These are seen as a plus within the industry. It can be helpful with obtaining a job. If you look at job postings, you will notice that it'll stay on there that having these sort of certifications is a plus. They are not typically a requirement for the field. They also can help with salary. Okay, sometimes if you have these sort of certifications, you may be entitled for these extra compensation as part of your role as a paralegal. So let's talk about work-life balance a little bit here within the classroom. It is achievable, okay? I'm going to respond to this question that just popped up here. And the question that was posed was, do different types of law, i.e. immigration versus criminal, have different expectations for getting an ABA certificate? I am going to say the answer to that question is no. So great question. I would say that most law firms, okay, within the legal industry, you will see within their job postings, they want somebody with an ABA certificate as a paralegal. So I don't usually see a distinction between criminal, we don't need that. Immigration, that we do that. So I would say that across the board, if you're going to work in a law firm, there usually is a requirement, or you will see more often, more likely true than not true, that most of those job posts are going to say that you need an ABA paralegal certificate. Great question. Within the classroom here, okay, work-life balance is achievable, okay? Classes are usually offered at night, and there are most schools offer online classes, and then we have synchronous and asynchronous offerings. So synchronous meaning that there is a designated time and place of when your class is, whether that's like 6 p.m. on a Wednesday night, or asynchronous being that you're at your own pace in which you take the class. And there are certain benchmarks or deadlines that you have to make by certain dates. Most ABA approved programs offer internships. These are a great building block to start. First of all, it's going to gain you some real life experience within the classroom. Second of all, what internships are going to allow you to do, it gets your foot in the door. You may be surprised, but by getting your foot in the door, usually, if you show your dedication, if you show your potential, there may be a job offer at the end of your internship. They maybe ask you to stay on. So these are great building blocks, and I would encourage anybody who is interested within this legal field, whether you're taking classes right now, I would definitely take an internship during my paralegal career, my paralegal program career. There are volunteer opportunities available. I will say it does seem like they are limited. There are some special interest groups that do have volunteer opportunities, but those are not as prevalent as job positions, as well as internships within a paralegal program. Now, as you start as a paralegal, there are some things that you want to develop over time. And some of these, folks, it takes time. That's all it is. It's not like a flip of a light switch, right? First of all is time management. One of the hardest things is there are only so many hours in a day. And we want to, we have to think about our well-being, our work-life balance, there's a million things going on, our families, our life outside of a profession. And so one of the things that we have to learn to do is time management. It's the idea of living in day-tight compartments within the office, working as a paralegal, getting the stuff done and off your desk in a timely fashion. I think it's probably the hardest thing, because sometimes we have so many different things going on, and that's probably like the hardest part. It's also part of the skill set that we want to do is to organize, okay? We have to do this assembly line system in which, okay, we need to draft this. The attorney needs to review. There might be revisions. We have a deadline of XYZ to get to the client, the court, opposing counsel. We have to be organized. There needs to be a method to your madness. Now, one size does not fit all. I will say that right now. So always be aware of that. Basic computer skills to start. So I'm sure everybody in here has some basic computer skills. You logged on to Zoom tonight, that is a skill in itself, because typically law firms are going to use these web platforms in order to have meetings and such. So you will build your legal technology software prowess over time. And then communication. It is about the idea that we need to constantly evolve our communication. Some attorneys, you got to be a little bit more of a, kind of just keep them going, make sure that they are on track. Others, got to let them go. We're always improving our communication skills as a paralegal. I have a question here, and I'll answer this one now. How do you keep attorneys on track with deadlines without badgering and offending your coworkers? Um, well, it's all about your rapport and relationship with the attorney, right? So, if there's a deadline related to that we have to file a motion by a certain date, you are in constant communications with that attorney and your team to make sure that that task is going to be completed. Now, I'm not really worried about offending my fellow paralegals, okay? I'm really not. Because at the end of the day, while we are one band, one sound, you're going to have different teams, right? And sometimes if there is a deadline, I'm going to have to utilize that person's time to make sure that the deadline is completed. And sometimes you got to just give a friendly heads up and be like, hey, I know I'm usurping all Danielle's time to make sure that the motion gets done here. You can have her next week, right? I know that you have a deadline next week. My deadline's tomorrow. I need her here. That's just the way it is. If you have a good camaraderie of folks, that usually isn't a problem. People are usually big enough to realize that. Now, I understand that there are some folks that are a little bit more prickly than others. I think one of the key things as a paralegal that you will learn is that you kind of gauge people's temperature, right? You know who you could joke around with, you know who you have to be like straight down the middle and play it straight from day one with the attorney. I think that's what's part of that's a skill that a paralegal develops is that you know when to turn on the heat for some attorneys, you know who you could joke with, you know who you have to play, kind of be soft and be like, hey, we have this deadline tomorrow. What's our timeline here? It's a feeling. There's no right answer here. I would say that sometimes, you just kind of get in the flow of things. So, getting started. Here are just some helpful tips that I would just volunteer here is that, start at the bottom rung. Don't be afraid to take a job that, might not be your number one choice, number one. Two, you may need to build some experience before you gain that paralegal role, right? So you may have to start out as a legal secretary. You may have to start out as a file clerk or a receptionist. Show that law firm that you are the best person for the job. Show up and muster all that you can to show people that you are competent, that you're smart, that you're dedicated. People will notice that. So I understand that as soon as you get out of a paralegal program, you're thinking, oh, I want to get hired as a paralegal. It's tough getting your foot in the door unless you know somebody. It's tough. It's a tight market. And there are going to be jobs out there where it'd be like, well, we want somebody with more experience, right? Look for jobs that you can apply for. There are jobs out there that do state that they're willing to take on a starter, someone who has less than a year experience. Look for those type of jobs. When you're at your first job, build that skill set. You're going to be learning your computer skills there. You're going to be learning the lingo, but you're going to also learn kind of those paralegal competencies that we've been talking about this evening. Show folks that you are the right person for the job. And then there's going to be a point, and this is true for those that are just starting out in the field, and those that have been in the field for 10 years, there's going to be a point where you need to be challenged more, where you've gone as far as you can in that role at this law firm. And that is when you start putting yourself out there, you build up the best resume that you can, you muster all out there, and you go out there and you prepare to take a giant leap forward. Prepare to swim the Pacific Ocean and drown in champagne. You go out there and you interview and you go and you do the best job that you can. As part of the paralegal profession, so if you decide to join this wonderful paralegal profession, under Business and Professionals Code 6450, subsection D, as in Danielle, you are required to continue your education journey. So every 2 years, you are required to do 4 hours of what are known as general credits and 4 hours of ethics. Some law firms may require more, and these MCLEs are basically 1 hour sessions about a certain topic that you are required to attend. They're offered across the board. Legal industries, paralegal programs offer these sessions throughout the year that you can attend. As part of your requirement as a paralegal, you're going to certify to your supervising attorney or to the law firm that you attended these. And typically you could sign, there's usually a form online stating that I attended these sessions over the last 2 years and I've met my requirements under the code. Final thing that I'll end with for tonight is related to networking. There are a number of opportunities out there related to networking. First of all, there are paralegal organizations where you can meet other wonderful legal professionals, whether that's through your local organizations or the national organizations. So here in the Bay Area, the big prominent paralegal association is the San Francisco Paralegal Association. There is an opportunity to volunteer within their boards to assist with the planning within this organization. It is a great way to meet certain folks and to discuss and build your legal vocabulary as well as your experience. It's always good to rub elbows with somebody who's been in the trenches. National organizations, the two big ones are NALA and NIFPA. These are paralegal organizations that provide a number of networking events and provide MCLEs. Benefits of joining paralegal organizations: mentorship. Most of these, they can connect you with somebody who is in the field and help address questions. Professional development, as we discussed before, it is a requirement if you're going to be a paralegal that you continue to develop your skills, and these organizations offer MCLE credits and events. Socialization, great way to talk to other paralegals within the field, and grab a beer. Usually these organizations will have social events where you get to know other people. And some of these organizations will post jobs. Most have a job board. I will also say that some of the schools within some paralegal programs have job boards as well, and I would encourage you to look at those. See another question here. I'm going to just stop my sharing here. Have you negotiated your salary now that you have years of experience? What is a reasonable starting wage and range of salaries in San Francisco? Okay. So have I negotiated my salary? The answer to that question is yes. So I worked at a small personal injury law firm for about 10 years, or I'm sorry, a little over 10 years. And when I moved to my new firm, I did negotiate my starting salary joining the new firm. And that was after a number of years of experience. I think I thought that I haven't had to negotiate my salary afterwards. My firm has treated me very well since then. Reasonable starting wage and range of salaries in Bay Area. Well, that is going to, there's two things to keep in mind here. Okay. I would say it depends on first, what is going to be your position? And I would also say what industry you wind up in. So I think it is a reasonable starting wage. Okay. If you started out as a junior paralegal, I would not be surprised if the range can be somewhere between, and it really depends also. I would also say locality is a big deal. So I don't know who we have here, if everybody's a San Franciscan Bay Area native, or if we have some people in Sacramento and the Folsom area. I would caution that it would not be surprising to me to see a range for a starting salary, $55K to $70K to start. Now, as you gain experience, as you hone your skills, it would not be surprising if, you would get incremental raises. And, I think the sky is kind of the limit. I mean, it does not surprise me for senior paralegals today in the Bay Area, okay, to be making 125K to about 150K. It would not surprise me regarding that. There are resources related to salaries that I know that they're known as Robert Half. I know that they put out salary guides. I think there's other salary guides out there as well. But as a safe bet, as a starting salary, I would say 55 to 70K is a reasonable expectation. Is there a pathway for older workers who worked in field before paralegals were developed? Absolutely. So I would say the paralegal profession, there's a number of folks who have switched career arcs, if you will. And I know folks who have started out way before, in which they were a legal secretary maybe 25 years ago, maybe somewhere in that range. And then maybe even longer, somewhere in the 25, 30 range, and then have gone back. They've taken courses to update their knowledge within the paralegal program, and they've utilized that experience from before and said, listen, I did this from the Stone Age, back when we didn't even have a legal technology, right? And I'm utilizing that now. That is a major selling point. There's definitely an ability to sell yourself as that. But I do know of workers who have worked in this field prior, took a break for whatever reasons, and then came back. There are definitely a lot of those. Definitely a good starting point. It's definitely encouraging that folks are coming back to this field. I would also add that putting courses on your resume that you're willing to, learn, willing to take on new responsibilities, is always welcomed, and something that lawyers and law firms look for, and the legal industry in general. For individuals looking to work in a paralegal role before applying to law school, would you recommend still getting a certification? Good question. That's a tough one for me. It may help. I know of students who go to the paralegal program. It does help with some of the basics because you'll learn some of the lingo and terminology. And so that kind of puts you a little bit ahead of the game when you first enter law school because you'll understand a little bit about procedure. You'll understand some of the terms. I'm just rereading the question here. So if your path is, I want to go direct to law school, right? I want to take, maybe your idea is this, and I'm going to present both two scenarios here. Maybe what you're feeling inside is that I want to go take the paralegal program first, make sure that I still want to be in legal, and then go to law school. I don't know. I would definitely take the courses and then I move straight on to law firm. I'm sorry, strike that, law school. If I'm going to become a working paralegal, even if it's for a year, I would complete the program. And that way you have you have that certificate, you could keep it on. And because, maybe at the end of the day, you love being a paralegal. I love what I do. And people have asked me for the last 10 years, when are you going to law school? And I tell them never. I never want to go to law school. I love what I do. And maybe you will have that sort of same experience. So I think I answered the rest of your question. So the person wrote us, related to the paralegal, especially if you only expect to work as a paralegal temporarily, would you say it's necessary or worth the cost and time? If you are working within you want to work as a paralegal, I would go ahead, finish the program, get your certificate, get in there and work full, even temporarily have a certificate for the paralegal because you know what? Always nice to have a backup. You may end up going to law school and you may say to yourself, holy cow, I don't want to, this is terrible. This is awful. I don't want to be a lawyer. I'm having way more fun being a paralegal. I'm just saying that, um, you know, that may interest you. That may spark something anew. Are the terms paralegal and legal assistant interchangeable across different legal fields? It depends. So I would say across the legal fields, it can be. Some law firms, it can be as well. I know that's like a terrible answer to your question, but there are some law firms that say that person's a legal assistant, even though you have your paralegal certificate, you have, you know, you have the education, you've been working and doing everything that a paralegal does. You may be referred to as a legal assistant. As far as I'm concerned, okay, and I would submit on this is that if you have a certificate, you've been working in the industry, you call yourself a paralegal. You are not just a legal assistant because there is sometimes this connotation, if you will, that legal assistant is more of a administrative role. That is not, while there is administrative parts of it, I got to tell you, as far as I'm concerned, paralegal is a paralegal. It is true. Yes, I agree with you. If you're going to say some law firms refer to paralegals as legal assistants, or, I know this one person who says a paralegal is a legal or a legal assistant is a paralegal. Yeah, I've heard that too. You're a paralegal. Go out there and tell people that. I know that, I recognize that that we don't dictate everything that a law firm can say, but I would just say to you is that yes, paralegals and legal assistants, they do tend to, jumble those terms together, but I believe I would submit there is a distinction. Paralegals typically have a certificate, they have the education, they have the experience. How to have work-life balance if your employer leaves you huge assignments and expects you to finish them by morning or over the weekend. Oh, well, that's an interesting question. Are you working as a paralegal? Where do you work where that happens? Listen, there are going to be times where the stuff, the task needs to be done. And it is about work-life balance and it's about bandwidth. That's what I'm going to emphasize here with my answer to this question, is that bandwidth is a very important concept. Now, sometimes you're the only paralegal because you're the only competent one amongst the group. Maybe you're the only paralegal at the law firm because it's such a small law firm. You're the only one who is capable of handling it. You have to balance it. You have to let the attorneys know, that one, your capacity is too large to handle. Okay. I would also suggest, related to this, is that depending on the assignment, you may need to require a little bit more time, and hopefully the people that you work with recognize this. Okay. And I understand sometimes it's a little bit more loosey-goosey, but what I'm saying is that, as you gain more experience, as you gain more time, typically you will be able to do tasks faster and more efficiently, which will certainly help. Now, I understand completely there are going to be some days in which, you're going to want to walk out the building, right? Because it's been one of those days. And I know the worst thing is the attorney comes to you at 5 o'clock and says, this needs to be done tomorrow. Now, hopefully, as a good paralegal, you're always keeping on top of that, right? You're kind of like, okay, I know that this task is due Friday. And so I'm going to be up in my attorney's face so that he or she is not coming to me on Thursday at 5 o'clock when I'm walking out that we have an overnight project. You try to keep the attorney on task. I know it's difficult, but those things do pop up, and it really depends on the line of industry that you're in. I would say that litigation, like I said, it's a bit of a roller coaster, right? You like roller coasters, litigation is definitely for you. Especially with trial work, there's always these competing deadlines, and you're always trying to get the work done. And there are some times where you're just going to have to put your head down and do that. But at the end of the day, work-life balance is possible as a paralegal. You could be a competent, tremendous paralegal and have all the time for your family, your friends, and yourself. It is achievable, but you have to, there may be some growing pains, but eventually you kind of learn method to your own madness, and you're able to do some Jedi mind tricks from time to time with the lawyers there and kind of be like, oh, aren't you working on that opposition? And then always says, yeah, I'm working on it. It's like, perfect. So I understand there's definitely a concern related to that. But, work-life balance is very important, as well as, mental wellness and wellness in general within the legal industry. This is not always the easiest industry to be in, but it certainly can be a lot of fun.
Thank you so much, Michael. Thank you for reading the question. I didn't have to do that. Thank you so much. That was the last question from the audience.
Okay.
So with that, I'd like to thank you, Michael, for sharing your experience and valuable insights with all of us today. We truly appreciate your time and expertise. And to everyone in the audience, thank you for attending and for your thoughtful, engaging questions. Your participation really added the value to this session. We look forward to seeing you at our next event. I will be sending out a brief evaluation survey along with Michael's presentation slides and a link to tonight's recording. Your feedback is incredibly important to us, so please take a moment to share your thoughts and help us improve future programming. Thank you once again, everyone, and wishing you all a wonderful rest of your day. Bye bye now.